folks? Welcome to Held Captive Media. I got my boy Zane here with me. And today we're just pulling up to the couch, having a fun little movie night and talking about Dazed and Confused. This coming-of-age film, directed by Richard Linklater, follows a group of rowdy teenagers in Austin, Texas, celebrating the last of their school year in the summer of 1976. It covers hazing and the high school experience, and even further, the experience of young people living in the mid-70s. Linklater is known for directing movies like Boyhood and the Before trilogy, which has been constantly praised for their realism and wit. Can we say the same for Dazed and Confused? Let's find out. Dog. Dazed and Confused is so much fucking fun, and it's such a great movie, and it really it's one of the movies that really inspired me, and it's just, there's something really great, and Kevin Smith said the same thing about Richard Linklater. He was inspired to make Clerks because of Richard Linklater's film Slacker. And Slacker and this kind of have the same vibe where it's like they're talking in a way like real people do. Everything's so earnest and real, even with its spices of like comedy and ridiculousness. All the characters feel like real people to me. And that's something that Richard Linklater really excels at. And this movie is no exception. It's a great stoner kind of coming of age comedy with real characters that are, don't get me wrong, ridiculous through many versions and depictions. Like, you know, we're seeing things in the 70s that would not fly today, conversations that would not fly today, but it's trying to depict the period and accuracy, and I think it does that. So before we get into your thoughts, I just want to say that my rating for this, and we'll get into spoilers and everything after this, but my rating is like a solid 9 out of 10. I think this movie is really good, and I understand how there's some Richard Linklater fans that kind of think this is some of his worser work. I have my reasons to disagree with that, but I totally respect people who prefer the Before trilogy. I think they're great too. So I just love Richard Linklater. What did you think about this? Is your first time, right?
Yeah, so this is my first time
shit.
Jumping into
You're
this.
probably the last person to see this movie.
I've always seen Dazed and Confused, but I've never actually just taken the time to sit down. There's a bunch of movies out there that are just kind of like that I'm like, oh no, I know generally of them because they're in the cultural zeitgeist, but like to actually sit down and watch this movie, I think one of the things that I was just absolutely blown away by was just like, as far as the stakes in the story, it just, most of the time it's like, oh, to like have a really good story, you have to have like all these crazy conflicts, and it has to be drama. It's got to be like so much intensity. And it's like the whole time, it's just fun. It's just kids having fun.
It's very much like a slice of life story. In some ways.
It literally just feels like somebody just like took a little knife, cut at the beginning and the end of a day in like a teenager's life, and it's so. It felt like youth. It just felt so much fun. I like just all of the characters, every one of them felt so genuine to me. They've all got their own motivations. They're each kind of like interweaving between all these different things.
Affleck.
Yeah.
Ben Affleck. This is one of actually his first film roles, other than, I believe he did like this weird high school graduation bully movie.
Did not even recognize him in this movie.
He's a little baby in it.
It wasn't even until the credits rolled and they were like, what's his name? It's like Oberon or something like that. And then it's like played by Ben Affleck. And I was like, that was Ben Affleck? What? Like, I obviously recognized
before
Matthew
he was
McConaughey,
even a leading man, before he was even a leading man.
But it was just like, it's that, like the whole cast, just like each little slice of teenagedom is represented and is kind of sprinkled in, and we watch them kind of interacting with each other, and it's just such a great way to tell a super low stakes slice of life. Just feels like you're back in high school again. It
so
feels
much
like all
personality.
The best parts about high school.
Yeah, it's all the personality, right? It's the way where you're watching a movie and you're like, okay, these people talk like my friends talk. Yeah. You know, these people carry on conversation and nip at each other in the same way.
And even though like we were in high school at the like middle, like we were 2010s.
We were the 2010s, yeah.
And this is supposed to be taking place in the 70s. It still feels so genuine. It still feels like
universal
conversation.
experience. Yeah.
I think as far as a number rating, this is going to be my first 10 out of 10.
The 10.
What is happening?
You know what? You can hit your applause button after the break, okay? No, don't do it. No.
Just chaos.
Stop. We're on the wrong soundboard, I think. It doesn't matter.
But no, it's straight up 10 out of 10 for me. I had such a fun time watching this. I'm almost glad that I didn't see it back in high school or something, because I don't think I would have appreciated it as much. And watching it now, it's just a fun ride to kind of be like as far as me and producer Lacey, we were watching it together, and she was like, this doesn't feel at all like my high school experience. And I'm like, this feels just like my high school experience. And it's getting to watch that dichotomy of just like the way that people interact with the world. And it's just fun and pure and simple fun, and with like these low stakes that are just great. And it's
a Youth in Revolt film that doesn't fail like Youth in Revolt. It's actually like a story of like a bit of rebel youth and getting along in the world in a way that's, I relate to it. It's kind of like American Graffiti with dirt on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just a little dirtier, but like still has that whole ended experience of relatability. Anyway, we're going to get into spoilers right after we come back, guys. So see you in a second. Been dazed and confused for so long. Anyway, we're back with more Dazed and Confused. We're going to get into some of the more spoilery stuff. So oddly enough, if you guys haven't seen the movie and you're watching this review, first of all, what are you doing? Go watch the movie. Otherwise, you're not going to know what the fuck we're talking about. But if you want to just continue on, just know that it's going to be spoiled from here on out. Hit that applause button. We fixed it. What's up? All right. So this is your first time watching the movie. I've obviously seen it like hundreds of times because it's a total classic. So when you first got into it, though, when did it kind of click for you that it was your kind of movie? Like, how soon in were you like, I get it?
So
because it's a general vibe the whole time, and like it doesn't really change. So like for me, it's like right at the beginning. I understand.
Literally at the intro when I hear that like sweet the
Sweet
introing with Aerosmith and like Hot Girl in the car rolling up a joint and everything. I'm like, this is so 70s and so just like a vibe. I'm like, I just absolutely am already in love with it. I'm like,
you love this so much. I'm so happy. We're gonna have to do Detroit Rock City if you haven't seen it, because it's got that same vibe to it. Okay, so then. All right, so pretty much instantly you were like, I get what the movie's going for. And like, here's the thing. There's going to be a lot of people out there that watch the movie and maybe they want something else from their cinema. Maybe they want more stakes, or maybe they want like less of the shrewd, more obvious open comedy. Or maybe they just find that the sensibilities of the 70s are way too offensive and they just can't watch it. And there's a lot of that in here, and I'm not going to trash people for feeling that way. But I do think that if you're able to ride with the fact that, like, yes, the things that these characters are saying, especially Matthew McConaughey, and whatever Pink's friend's name is, the dude with the overalls, the other football player, I can't remember at this moment. Those dudes say some problematic things. And I just accept it as, like, listen, this was the 70s. Teachers really did allow students to be publicly hazed.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things that kind of, like, instantly... At first, I was like, okay, so I'll be able to relate to this somewhat, but there's going to be things like the hazing thing. Like, people talked about, like, in my school, I remember people like, oh, yeah, you better be ready for the freshman hazing. There's going to be the freshman hunt or whatever. There wasn't one. Like, it wasn't.
Things have evolved since the 70s,
like,
thankfully.
That shit didn't happen anymore. And it's like, there are things like that it's like, but then there's still the general, like, teasing that Mitch gets when he's like all of the seniors, when like he's hitting on this like older girl or whatever, they're all like, hey, Junior, get over here. and then they're like, dude, that's like
that
what are you
shit
doing?
definitely does
It's-
happen.
Yeah, it's like shit like that is like such a perfect little slice that it's like it doesn't matter when it happens.
And the fact
it's
that
still,
like in the earlier part of the movie, the fact that we don't relate to the hazing, in no way does it make the world feel smaller. I mean, that scene where they all tackle him after his baseball game with the paddles, the no more Mr. Nice Guy. That is one of the most iconic scenes from the movie.
Well,
constantly spoofed by Family Guy, Robot Chicken, whatever.
even without,
And it's like not something that I can all relate to, but the action of it makes it so wholly relatable because we all, as a young person, have felt out of control. Like, the worst part about being a kid, and I'm not saying that, you know, being a kid is all bad. Being a kid can be a great thing. But one thing that kids never get respect for, and one thing that's absolutely true, is it's not always actually easy to be a kid. There are things that come with being a powerless, voiceless person and having essentially less pull and dynamic in your own life. You know, you really can't make a lot of your own decisions or pave the way for your life that you want to at a certain age. And so the hazing and all that stuff, it really is so relatable to that period of your life that when I, as a kid, saw this movie, I related more to the Mitch character. Mm-hmm. And as I've gotten older, I see myself more looking in the rear view of being like, that's an experience that I understand.
Yeah.
And that was really profound for me to kind of come to the realization that I'm no longer these children. Mm-hmm. And that upon this watch, I'm an adult looking in my rear view, as the whole movie is a rear view in a sense. It's an entire depiction of the past. But that actually made the movie better for me.
Yeah,
I don't know how it made you feel, but
so
that really helped it for me.
As far as not being able to relate to the hazing stuff, it's not even so much that like the physical actual like beating a child, like that's not something that's really around. But still, seniors fucking with freshmen is always still a thing. Like when we were high school seniors in the drama club, and we got that like last round of freshmen where we finally got a couple of like freshman boys, and we were picking on them every once in a while. But
I don't know what you're talking about, dude. Me and the boys were tight. I love those kids.
I remember messing with them like every once in a while, just like giving them shit, like making them run around, do something, not like actual like meanness. Yeah. But anytime I'm like, I pick on them a little bit, instantly I then go like, okay, but come on, we're gonna go do something cool.
Yeah, give them a hard time because they're so scared of this new high school experience.
Yeah, and they're
just trying to fit in, and they'll do anything to fit in a way. And you just kind of like to play with that a little bit with them, but at the same time, you're also reassuring, like dude, hey, you totally have a place here. You have friends here. There's people who understand.
And that's as soon as Pink made that switch where he was like, you
that
think
little
that he's gonna,
soft
and
hit.
then he hits it, and then he's like, hey man, like let me give you a ride home.
And then he started talking about, man, when I was a freshman, the fucking they took me to get drunk, and then in that moment he's like, oh shit, I'm gonna do the same thing for this kid.
Yeah,
and they do it.
It just felt so genuine because you get these kids that are like, this is the most genuine I've ever felt. Like I know that a lot of people look to things like, as far as just how people talk in movies, people look to like Quentin Tarantino. People are always like, oh, but he writes people the way that people actually talk, and it's like, no, he just uses a lot more profanity, which like, yeah, that's
I don't think I've ever heard that about Tarantino, but I could see why people would say
I've had people tell me that. And then also like as far as I know that we did our Juno review and we were talking about like how well she wrote the
quippy dialogue,
yeah,
Cody,
and it's like it's kind of, but this felt the most like actual, like literally when the dude is like, I had this really weird dream. No, never mind. I don't want.
Are you talking about the fucking Abraham Lincoln thing?
Awkwardness, and then it's like he's like this perfect, sexy female body, and then the head of Abraham Lincoln, and I don't know how to feel about that, and like it made me uncomfortable, and I just don't. And it's like that's high school. That's like hormones where you're like, I feel really uncomfortable about this thing that happened, and I don't know, I'm not really sure of myself yet, and I don't know how to have a proper interaction to talk about this.
Yeah.
And it just like,
but I trust you, my one friend.
Yeah.
I'll say that ridiculous ass shit to you, and he's just like,
he's like,
but then later
weird.
in the movie, he's in a car with his friends, and he's talking about how he no longer wants to be a lawyer, but he wants to dance, and it's so great. And
yeah,
you know, there's so many.
But then you also got the super serious conversations, like him talking about like, you know what, like he wanted to be a lawyer because he's like, I want to fight for the underprivileged. That's some like pure, like youthful, like looking for the bright side of the world. And then he's talking about like, he's like, oh, I actually had to spend a lot of time with these fucking like these people that I just didn't like, and fuck them. Like, I don't actually want that.
He's like, I don't like people. You guys are okay. Aside, but mostly I don't like people. And
So you do get these dumb things next to these things where it's like they're kids, but they're still intelligent. It's not like they're dumb just inherently because they're young. But you also get these things where it's like they are young, so they don't know themselves yet.
Plenty of them are highly intelligent, and most of them lack a distinct amount of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And that's why Juno and this movie and plenty of other movies can be great youth and revolt style stories, because the most important thing to understand about kids is that they aren't necessarily dumb.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just aren't that wise.
Yeah.
And how can you blame them? They were cooked 4 to 5 minutes ago. Exactly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm still figuring shit out now. Yeah. And I'm 10 years older than a majority of the characters' ages in this film. And I feel like, to a certain extent, there's questions that they ask of the world where I'm like, oh, I almost get your perspective there. And it's because kids aren't dumb. The movie doesn't treat kids like they're inherently dumb. Although I do love that they also don't shy away from some of the more crudeness that comes with being a teenager.
Yeah.
Some of the more harsh ways to treat other people, because you just haven't, your empathy bottle isn't full yet. You haven't figured out that you want to treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
So, the hazing goes a little harsh, and some of the characters act ridiculously towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just a great film. I think it understood its characters so well. Now, like, if we're talking about the way this film was shot, it's shot comparably. I think that it does its job. I don't think Richard Linklater is the director who's a lot like Kevin Smith in the sense that he goes, I'm going to write great characters, and then I'm going to put a camera on them, and then they're going to talk, and they're going to be really believable, and it's not going to move. The camera will not move. Yeah. And that's fine for what he wants to do. But I also see why people could watch it and be like, fuck, man, this is really stale.
Yeah.
Quick directing. And that's fine that people feel that way. It's all about what you're looking for with the movie.
But then you also get things like the soundtrack, which perfectly encapsulates and just like moves the story along so well.
It's all like known bops. So it's things that, like, I could watch this movie with my dad and he'll understand, he's born in 60. So it's like a lot of this stuff was actually his real experience. Mm-hmm. And I have seen it with him. And one of the things that I always found funny about when I watched it with him is he always knew every song that would come on.
Yeah.
And I think that was, maybe at first I didn't fully appreciate that choice, because I hate movies that are just stocked with good soundtrack, like Suicide Squad and shit. Yeah. Like, oh great, it's got a good soundtrack. It's a piece of shit movie, and soundtracks don't really make the movie. With this being such a love letter to the period, as well as trying to make you feel the vibe that this movie is not only taking place in the 70s, but was made in the 70s, and you're in the 70s. Like, it's trying to instill that in you, and the soundtrack really adds to it.
I think because the whole time it's these kids that are moving around through the cars, they're showing up at these different locations. It's really, half of the time, most of them are just kind of wandering around, doing dumb shit, driving around in the cars. It feels like if somebody made just a great mixtape, tossed it on in, it felt like some of the mixtapes we had when we would all pile into my car.
We had like the shitty mid-90s version of the soundtrack in
exactly.
your car.
Yeah, we would all load up into my car, toss on the soundtrack.
We're like, we're going to listen to Hollywood Undead and New Medicine, and we swear we're not douchebags.
Yeah, and just fucking blare it and just have a good time listening to good music. And it was all about like that high energy brought about all
and
the craziness.
High energy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, internet. No. Totally. And
so going through and like watching the way that each of the different things builds on the other is so interesting for this film.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your favorite scene? I just want to know, because I feel like we can wax on and relentlessly about like how much we love the movie and all these great things about it. But what's something where you're watching it and it's like, okay, this is sticking in my mind post watching it, and I feel like it's going to be something I always think of when I think of the movie. What's that scene for you? I'll start with mine. I think one of the best scenes in the movie, and so like under talked about considering who Ben Affleck is when those freshman kids turned back around and fucking got him back. because it's multi-layered, right? Like there was a senior who was going to pretend to paddle him to do it. There's all the seniors that were in on the joke. All these people hated this guy because he was an asshole. And I just think it's funny that it was like this universal feeling between all of them where they're like, yeah, you know, like we're cool with hazing and everything, but this guy's a fucking dick. You guys can get him back. And it's that general understanding between all these characters. It really helps too with this idea that they were chasing them down and beating them. Because you see, for everybody else, it's about tradition and fun. And for this guy, it's some weird thing he's missing in his life.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so, like, let's not let him get away with it.
And I was going to say, my favorite scene was like Split, the reason that it was taking me a long time, because I was
You were like, I don't know which one to say.
I love the scene where the kids are like the chase scene with them in the car. Basically, I just love when it's that senior guy interacting like
because Ben Affleck is actually like I'm not
great actor.
Yeah, and he knew then, I think, and like you know this part as a result, you know, having Kevin Smith be a huge Linklater fan later led to him being in Mallrats and Chasing Amy and Dogma, and then as it eventually grew to make Good Will Hunting because Kevin helped produce it. This movie, in a lot of ways, is a Kickstarter of careers in some ways, and I think he just nailed it. Like much so that you guys, when you were watching it, like you told me, you guys didn't even realize it was Ben Affleck till you saw the title role, and it's like, how often do you watch a movie with Ben anymore and you can't tell it's him?
Exactly. But no,
and it's more than just the way he looked. It was the way he was acting.
It's the way that he was acting, and I loved the just the way that they melded all the different social groups. Because I feel like most movies, anytime it's set in a high school, they're like, and this is the popular kids, and these are the jocks, and those are the burnouts.
That's usually not really how a high school works.
This felt so much like our high school, where it's like, blended. Technically there are kids that are a little bit more popular than others, but like you still have Pink hanging out with the three nerdy kids.
Yeah, and the stoner group
and
too.
The stoner group, yeah. And then like it's all this blending of where it's like, yeah, technically probably like the redheaded girl isn't gonna go hang out with Donnie or anything, but like Pink hangs out with Donnie, and then
Pink hangs out with Donnie and Tony, and like all these characters, you know, they all go to parties with each other because it's got that small townism as well. Like the way he directed this movie, I always bring this up in films, but I think this is so important. There has to be an element and a feeling in order for me to get along with like a youth and revolt story, with a coming of age story. And it has to feel like the neighborhood in which they exist is a neighborhood I could go to, right? Yeah. And this feels so small town and so real. It's like, you know, I just any second you feel like other characters from another side of the movie could pop up because of that small townism. And that happens repeatedly. Constantly. I mean, Matthew McConaughey driving up to them while they were at that shitty fast food restaurant and be like, come to the party. You should ditch the nerds, blah, blah, blah. You know, you don't necessarily see that scene coming, but because of that small townism that they built, you don't have to suspend your disbelief to believe these characters would meet up.
Weird.
It seems totally real and totally could happen.
And that's one of the things, like just as far as like how real everything feels, like when the big sister goes to tell all the guys like, hey, like take it easy on my little brother.
Any sister who do that is a fool.
Yeah, instantly the guys are like, oh, we're gonna absolutely fucking dog on him. And as soon as the little brother hears that she asked that, she's like, they were so mean to you right after I told them to be nice. And he's like, why the fuck would you do that? He's like, no wonder. You're the reason that they attacked me so violently. Like, what are you talking? And then they tie it back in where he's like, just don't tell mom to take it easy on me. Yeah. It's like, what does that mean? And it's like, but then she does tell mom to take it easy on him. Do you love the scene where he comes home drunk and she's like, are you drunk? He's like, no.
Then he puts on his big fucking podcast level headphones.
I remember one night coming home and I'd been out hanging out with some friends.
Oh no, we're starting the stories already.
Well, this
go ahead. Go ahead.
So I come home and my mom, like I was the worst about this. Anytime I was out doing anything that I shouldn't have been, or let's go ahead and say someone who isn't me, Swim was out doing something, I would always just whatever I was doing, I would make it 1,000 times worse than what I was actually doing. That way my mom would just be like, go to bed and leave. I remember coming home one night. My breath probably smelled a bit like stale onions or something. Yeah. And she's like, "Where have you been, young sir?" And I was like, "Oh no, dude! I was just out at my coke dealer's house. He said that he had a bunch of a blow that he wanted to pass around." And she's like, "You shouldn't joke about that." And he just went into her room, and I was like,
Wow.
Got away with it.
I don't think that's getting away with it. I think that's beating your mother into submission, actually. But okay,
She's like,
getting
at least
away
it
with
wasn't
it.
that.
But
no.
like she definitely knows what you've done.
Yeah.
But you're just
you're just young and you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna say something ridiculous and like
the amount,
and I know that you know.
This movie perfectly depicts, and the amount of children that this is true for. How many kids think that their parents are like literally the stupidest people alive? You got an order of like a bajillion kegs at your house under your name. He's like, I don't even know, Dad.
Yeah, that's
don't
crazy.
hit me, Dad. You know, like,
and then the kids are showing up at the house. I do love that tie-in where the kids keep showing up and they're like, what?
They're jumping in the bushes and shit. Yeah, and he's just out. He's out partying.
No,
he's out partying anyway because he knows when he gets home he's fucked. So he might as well go have fun somewhere else and then come home. Yeah. It's a great movie. Is there anything else you wanted to say about it? I think there's so much we could say. I mean, just the plot progression, the way everything moved forward with it just being this one continuous day, like right after school, and yet following all these different characters. It invoked the feeling of me of actually being there on the last day of school. You know what I mean? Like, it does have that vibe. You know, the kids throwing the books and the papers everywhere. I remember when we fucking graduated, I got hit with someone else's book, and I was so happy. I was like, no, it's cool. It's fine. We're the fuck out of here. Like, that's exactly how I was. So I just wondered, like, is there anything else you wanted to add to it? What emotion did this evoke for you?
So I want to circle back to my favorite scene, just kind of end on that.
Okay, good.
I think my favorite scene might actually be where Mitch finally, like, the whole time he's kind of quiet, reserved. He's like, "Oh, that's funny, yeah." They're like, "Throw the bowling ball," and he's like, "Throw the bowling ball." Okay, yeah. Throws it. Go get a 6-pack. Okay, yeah. And then he kind of like starts to. You feel when he gets that like 6-pack, he's kind of starts to get into it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, no, I just graduated," and like he's being a little bit more smooth with it.
Earlier in that conversation, the fucking gas station guy's like talking to the pregnant woman, like, "You have to smoke up and have fun," and like that's a great depiction of the 70s. But what about it?
You finally get to feel like once they get to I think it's the moon tower.
Yeah.
When they're all climbing up the thing, Mitch fully comes out of his shell, and they're talking about like, "Oh yeah, this freshman, he had one beer and he fell all the way down.
He hit his head on everything on the way down. You probably died before you hit the ground."
Yeah, and he's like actually throwing shade back at the seniors after he's kind of had that grow moment where he got to pick on O'Brien or whatever, or Oberon. And it's like you get to fully watch this kid go from scared kid to like understanding, okay, this is actually like a world that I'm about to be a part of and I can accept my place here. And then he fully kind of like ingratiates into the group.
And the same thing goes with the freshman girl that they followed the whole time, where she starts, I mean, granted, yet again, we're talking about the 70s, so calm down. But she starts this relationship with Tony. And, you know, it's kind of interesting because it's like an introduction to high school, and this character is more portrayed as like trying to respect women and people because he doesn't like the hazing and all this shit. And it's just a cool evolution because this movie starts with her being essentially a nobody, standing off to the side, like not even trying to like be a part of the pledge system, not even trying to become a popular person. And then one person notices her, Mitch's sister, and just like drags her through this night that like she grows to not at all regret, that she's had a full character growth of her own. And there's tons of cool shit like that in the movie.
So while this movie, like for the seniors in it, feels like an encapsulation of youth, it's also at the same time a coming of age story for the two freshmen.
Yeah,
so you
definitely.
get to see that like, okay, we're here, we're reminiscing about like our youth and like being a young rebellious teenager is. We're kind of reminiscing and growing and thinking about that, but we're also realizing that as we're in this point, other people are also reaching up to grow to that point. So it's a great way to show the fact that, like, even when you're at wherever you're at and you think you're comfortable, like, other people are growing to match up with you. And then after they graduate and everything, they're then going to have to grow, and they're then going to have to, and it's kind of this perfect cycle of youth and growing up that.
Yeah, the film's very Americana. It shows like this history and this tradition, and in that aspect, it's really great. And Matthew McConaughey, we didn't really mention him, so I just want to talk about that for a second. Yeah. First of all, Matthew McConaughey is the most perplexing part of this movie.
He's just living
L-I-V-I-N. I'm actually not the biggest fan of the character, not because I hate Matthew McConaughey or even his performance. This movie is solely remembered by the masses for his part in it.
Yeah.
And it is such a small part of the movie. I mean, it really isn't. It doesn't amount to very much.
That's as soon as he showed up on the screen, I was just like, okay, there's 4 lines that I'm gonna wait for him to say. There's the "be a lot cooler if you did."
All right, yeah.
That's what I love about high school girls.
God.
And then the L-I-V-I-N.
Yep.
Like that was the 4 things that I was like, okay, this is what I know about this movie, and that's all that was in the zeitgeist. And I've sat on this movie for so long, not actually watching it. And the fact that I sat back on this and I was like, oh yeah, no, like there's a couple weird lines from Matthew McConaughey. That's basically Dazed
the whole
Confused.
movie. Everybody thinks that's the movie. Yeah.
It's like, this is now one of my favorite movies now.
Fuck yeah, I love that.
Like, it's such a, like, it is sad to see that, like, that part of it got co-opted and just like ran through the cultural zeitgeist, whereas like there's so much to love about this movie and it's just so cool. Like, there's so many other parts of this movie that I wish got like as much
as
play
memed.
as this. Yeah.
I really do wish the overall like gas station scene just needs to be like a meme profile.
Yeah.
Because it's just like when you're trying to buy alcohol and you're just like, he's literally like, yep, just graduated and I'm gonna be working for the city and shit.
Yeah.
He's literally borrowing lines he heard from the other older people. Like, he literally stole that directly from Matthew McConaughey's character, who said essentially the same thing. And by the way, fuck Mitch's friend, the blonde guy. Yeah. I can't remember his name right now. Carl. Fuck Carl. Carl fucked with his friend who's macking on this hot chick who was super into him at the dance. Fuck you, Carl.
Took him away from that and then ended up getting his ass beat.
I know. He got a beer out of it, but I wouldn't have made that trade. If we're being honest, wouldn't have made. If I was in his position as
a freshman, I would have made that trade.
Yeah, because you're a fool.
Yeah,
that's pretty much what it is. I think we got everything across we wanted to. I mean, honestly, guys, just go watch the movie. It's on Hulu. You can probably rent it on digital media for like $2.99 anywhere. Any Richard Linklater movie is a total suggestion, but this is a great starter if you want to get involved. It's on Prime Video as well. So yeah, check out Prime Video. And like, if you want to check out Linklater's films and you want a place to start, like, this is the best start point. It's the least level of entry. It's the easiest thing to watch. It's just a great movie to watch. Mm-hmm. We'll be right back with like a little story, I guess, some games, in a sense. I don't really know how to describe it, but we'll be right back.
Story time.
You may know me as the guy who forgot to say his catchphrase at the top of this episode, but right now, Jesus Christ, right now, we are going to play a little, would you call it a game, I guess?
I said story time with friends.
Well, I'm dubbing it, we're going to tell some stories, bitch.
Why?
Hit the button. Wrong button. Thank you. One day, I hope that people, like, there will be some super fan out there. It might never, not ever happen, but maybe like one super fan will just like take all of the dumb titles I've called things.
I think 3 of the titles have just been bitch.
Actually, the only time I've said bitch was during the Juno reading. I didn't say bitch like that at any other time.
Yeah.
It's fine. All right. Do you want to start or do I want to? We're just going to tell some stories of youth and revolt of our own.
I'll go ahead and I'll
Are you gonna do it or not? You're taking a while to decide.
So I think probably one of my favorite stories as far as like a time that one of the things that we used to do all the time was I was one of the few of our friends that had a car that just like it was a beat up Ford Focus, and I would just like do bad things to it, like drag race and drift it. And
Yeah, you did.
Logan almost had a heart attack every time he got in the car with me, but I was the only person with wheels, so I was always driving places, and people would complain, and I'm like, okay, you get to drive next time. But no, I remember
we were all poor.
Yeah.
But Zane had a Ford Focus, so everything
Dude, it was the most. I think I got it because my great great grandma died. And
wow, you don't know for sure?
It's
that's your great whoever's legacy you have.
So
you didn't even know.
It was her car technically, but my great uncle was using it to run errands for her, and then when she died, he was like not super reliable, so they were like, hey, no, we're taking this car back, like we're gonna like I think originally it went to my sister.
So wait, because he wasn't reliable, they gave it to you? That's gotta be the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
They gave it to my sister.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
And then after she got her like proper car, it got handed down to me. So it was like 8 cars deep, and I remember having to like when it originally came to my sister, my great uncle was like a heavy smoker, and the car just like, it only had like 10,000 miles on it. It was like 15 years old or something, but just like the like ceiling was separating from all the smoke and everything, and it was just nasty.
It's pretty gross.
He would put out his cigarettes and
the window,
like in the,
you had to physically push on the window to pull it down.
Yeah,
you remember that?
Yeah, that was.
And then I almost, like, you said I was pushing too hard, and then I was going to break your window, and I was like, at least it would be down. I remember that argument we had that one day.
But like, it was just constantly, everybody would pile into my car, and then we would just like go around. So for our city, we've got a big interstate that kind of encircles the city, and we would just hop on to the circle, and at a random point in time, somebody would be like, this exit, and we would just take that exit and get lost. And that we just called it adventuring. Like, we would just go off, get lost.
It was also referred to as road roulette.
Yeah.
By a couple of people. It was pretty scary. I hated it.
And then around like 3 in the morning or something, we'd finally have the one friend who has like good, like his parents wouldn't yell at us for turning on the internet on his phone, and he would like boot up his phone, turn on the GPS, and we'd find our way home. But yeah, it was just literally, we would all pile into the car, go get lost, and we had some of the dumbest, craziest things that we would do on these.
I remember when you woke me up at 3 a.m. We were driving around. I fell asleep in the back seat, and you woke me up by screaming Chinese fire drill, and everyone started getting out of the car and running around, and I had never done that. And then I guess what had happened is the back doors locked behind them. So then 2 people that were in the front were like, fuck. And they're like, Logan, open the door. I'm like, what's happening? Yeah.
Oh,
that was bullshit.
There's also the time that we were 3 of our friends. We didn't know about this at the time. I learned about it before you did. You learned when the fuses were being lit, but a bunch of them had bought fireworks, and it was my car and another guy's car. We were driving down the interstate, and the people in the back decided to start lighting smoke bombs and firecrackers and throwing them at the other cars.
Yeah, not great.
At each other, not at other cars. There was nobody else on the road. It was like 2 in the morning
in the middle of
nowhere.
The other car, except for one gentleman who I stopped from throwing it into a stranger's car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was pure chaos.
But you know what? We turned out all right. No one died, right?
That's what I'm saying. Everybody was like saying, you're a really scary driver. And I'm like, did you die?
There is that one guy that we hung out with, we don't remember the name of, and we don't know where he went or came from.
So that would, yeah.
But we'll get into that a different day. There's a guy out there, if you know who you are, we went to a hospital with you once. Please tell us who the fuck you are, because neither of us can even remember your name, and you were there the whole night, and I don't know who you are.
So yeah, that's just, it's pure chaos, because everybody's like, there was definitely another person in the group with us.
100%.
We were all
100%.
adventuring through this thing, and it's just like we're all just like, who was that person that was there with us?
And then the worst part is the group photo we took, that person took the photo.
Yeah.
How fucked up is that? Anyway, I want to tell some youth and revolt story of my own. Okay. So this one's so stupid, but I love it. So I'm hanging out with my boys. We're playing D&D all weekend. This is back.
Always.
This is actually before you. This is the summer before I moved to this area.
Okay.
This is a story you might have not heard. And we had this guy with us, and he was like, hey, because we were all in this really small house in this out in the boonies, essentially. It was like a really tiny house that my friend's like mom owned, and then they lived there together. And it was tons of us. I used to run huge D&D groups of like 12 to 20 people at a time. So
how do you even get a turn?
It takes a while, but I still did it. And at one point, somebody was like, hey, I know a place where we could go play, and it would be fine. It's like, yeah, it's my place. And we're like, all right, cool. So we all pile up. We go to that person's place. We play like 6 hours of D&D, and then a bunch of strangers walk in the house that none of us, including that guy, knew. And it turns out that he just noticed, because he lives nearby, that this place had been abandoned for like super long. And I'm like, were you casing the place? He's like, no. I'm like, what, were you casing it to find a place to play fucking D&D? So I had to explain to these people who were screaming, essentially, like, listen, we're leaving right now. I swear to God, we're leaving. We were literally eating their food, everything. And this dude, who I didn't know that well, and I won't say his name, but you should be arrested. And I think you are, so it's fine. So that was so... But it was cool. It was the crazy turn about it, though, is we started talking to these people, and then I kind of linked with the dad, and he was like, oh, that's cool. You guys play D&D. Like, he was so fucking nice. And I'm like, this could only happen to teenagers. If I was like 20 and this happened, I would look like Swiss cheese. The dude would have put bullets inside of me.
And it's some of those things where it's like,
all of these stories that we've said, we do not recommend to any of you shitlins out there who might still be in high school.
Oh my God.
We do not recommend it. But listen, if you got any good stories of your own, leave them in the comments, because we want to read them. Please interact with us. Like, comment, subscribe.
For legal reasons, this did not happen to you. It was Swim did it.
Say Swim did it.
Someone who isn't me. Swim did that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I want to hear those stories.
Isn't it? Wait, someone who isn't me?
Swim.
Isn't it? Is one spelled with a W?
Someone is one word.
Someone who
isn't me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah. Swim did this story, and it was a good time.
That's great. Anyway, thank you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.